Great. Thanks, David. So let me see if I can got the technology down here. So in Oregon, we've had a coastal atlas for quite some time now, dating back to about 2002 was the first time that our project went public on the web. And before that, we'd had it running internally for a little while. We kind of see our atlas as a venue for interacting with the constituents of the Coastal Zone Management Program in the Oregon coast. So our initial focus was sharing data, and then we backed out from that initial goal into some of the other things that our atlas does. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. And just to give you a sense of the extent of our atlas, because the definition of what is coastal came up earlier. In Oregon, the coastal zone encompasses all of the coastal watersheds except for our 3 largest rivers, where it goes a reasonable extent inland. And then offshore, it goes out 3 miles to the extent of the edge of our territorial sea. And sometimes even we like to have the picture be slightly beyond the territorial sea because we have what we consider an ocean stewardship area. It's not really recognized in anything other than Oregon statute, where we like to do coordination with federal activities that are going on off of the Oregon territorial sea. So that's our extent. Our background is that internally we launched a project in 2001 to solve a problem that we had where the program, the Coastal Zone Management Program, was sitting on archives of data in various forms, various media, that didn't have much of an audience or an afterlife in terms of being used beyond the original project that it was created for. So we basically felt that this data was being underutilized, and plus our archives were not all that well organized, and that if we could put it on the web in a way that others in our network could use it, we would essentially be making better use of the money that was spent to collect the data. So after thinking about that problem, we approached others in our neighborhood who were interested in doing things with coastal GIS. Dawn's lab at Oregon State University. We had a local NGO in Portland called EcoTrust that we partnered with, and we put together a proposal that was we received initial seed funding from NOAA CSC, and then our large grant from National Science Foundation to put the project together. So the real atlas debuted in 2002 and was live through 2006. We call that our version 1. Then 2007 it underwent a large overhaul, and the current version that you see on the web is sort of the Atlas version 2 that's been in public circulation since 2007. In that process of transitioning from our version 1 to our version 2, we learned a lot of things about, obviously technology changed a lot in those years, but also our user base. The capabilities of our user base changed a lot, and we tried to implement many of those lessons learned into the current version. And I would guess we would have to say that we continue to learn from how people use our atlas, and we try to kind of roll that into future versions. So this is the front page of our site. That's the URL. What I'll do real quick here is take you through. Okay, this was working. There we go. It's very pale. I'll take you through the 4 main functional areas of the site, which are highlighted here on the front page. There's maps, learning, search, and tools, and the data archive search. I break the talk out this way because people always ask, well, what do people do with your atlas? And while we started out with a project to share our data archive, we quickly, while we were putting together the project scope, realized that that's really only interesting to people who want our data who already want our data. So that means that they are experts, and that they're seeking something maybe in a geospatial data form. But really, we knew that the constituents of the Oregon Coastal Zone Management Program were way larger than that group of people. And a lot of them especially at the initial time, couldn't use GIS data in a directly GIS form. ArcInfo was still very expensive. Not very many people had access to GIS tools. So we decided that in addition to making the data available and getting our archive in order, making that public, that we had to actually make some interpreted products from our data to draw people into the issues of coastal zone management and why data that's collected for the coastal zone is important. And that led us to develop other sections of our atlas. And we decided when we mapped out all the types of things that we thought our user audiences would want to do, we settled on these 4 major functional areas. So, like I said, we started out with search. The search interface that we have that's currently up on the atlas is the oldest part of the Oregon Coastal Atlas. It's based purely on a database that has some discovery metadata about our data holdings. I would say because it's the oldest, it's probably the clunkiest and probably most in need of updating. And at the end of my talk, I'll talk a little bit about how we think the updating of this portion of our atlas is going to go. The search portion of our atlas is a gateway to a whole bunch of data sets that we have in our atlas that relate to a whole bunch of topics. There's your classic sort of base layers that are available for our coast, as well as a whole bunch of data sets that were collected project by project over the years, various themes that were examined. The Oregon Coastal Management Program in Oregon is a networked program, so we act as a pass-through for NOAA funds that end up in other agencies where projects are executed. And so we're trying to make it so that all the data products that come out of those projects end up being findable through the Coastal Atlas. This little graphic down at the bottom here is a Wordle made out of the search terms that people use to access data in the Coastal Atlas. So you get a sense of the types of topics that people are interested in that are covered. Our Learn section was kind of developed to lead people to data through other means. So we wanted to be able to illustrate the coast systematically, system by system, let people look up the various estuaries on the coast, learn about the different places, but we branched it out into also people being able to learn about the various topics that come up in coastal zone management and illustrate the places on the coast where some of those topics manifest on the ground. So the types of content that you see in our learning section have to do with either typical web pages that are text and image based, or we build these composite reports by connecting various data sets that we have together. So we illustrate the coast using pictures from our picture database, maps from our map database, list data from our data sets archive, and combine that with text information about the locations on the coast. Tools were ways of using geospatial data to solve problems that happen repeatedly on the coast. So maybe certain types of users have specific questions that happen over and over again, and then people create a tool to solve a particular type of inquiry. We list those tools here. Some of the tools that are listed in our archive were ones that we created. In other cases, we link to tools that other folks have created. The idea being that it's this is an ever-growing catalog of ways of using data about the coast in ways that are helpful for answering coastal zone management questions. Examples of 2 of the tools that were created in-house in Oregon. On the left is our coastal access inventory that allows people to maybe you frequent the Oregon coast all the time on the north coast because that's close to Portland and that's where you're driving from, but maybe once a year you get to go to the south coast on a longer vacation. This helps a user find access points with certain types of attributes that they might want for planning a vacation or something like that. Allows people to search for certain types of facilities that have certain types of activities associated with them, etc. The right-hand side is a tool that allows people to search for the latest beach water quality results on their favorite beach on the Oregon coast. And it allows people to go into sort of as much detail as they want. So a person can pull up the report the latest report for an entire beach, or even within a beach, they can go down to the individual testing stations on a beach and pull up the entire time series for a particular station on the beach. So you may learn from something like this that the end of the beach that's near the coastal outfall is maybe not the place to like spread your blanket on any given day after a rainstorm. And then the maps section really had to be in our atlas because, like I said, a lot of our customers did not have access to GIS to begin with. So we wanted a place where people could browse the coast, browse the data sets that we had. And we started it out with a basic viewer that allowed people to, look at a variety of different base maps and a variety of different overlays. That was in our version 1. In our version 2, what we have is we maintain mainly a constant base map. That's sort of this Google-ish looking base map, but allow people to thematically change the overlays that are displaying on here. So there's, we still maintain the opportunity to flip out the base maps, but not as many as we had in our version 1. So I'd say an enhancement that we added to the maps that goes beyond what a normal interactive map might do is that we linked our map to the composite reporting that we created for the learning section. So you may be browsing a map of estuaries on the Oregon coast, you see one that you're interested in, you click on it, and rather than just giving you the name or a few attributes about it, you can actually link to the entire composite report for that location, which in turn is linking to multiple databases about that location. So that model is, we've extended that both for places and for topics on the Oregon coast. Just briefly, I'd mentioned that the technology used behind our atlas started out in our version 1 being a combination of open source mapping on the map side of things and sort of closed source scripting and other technologies for managing of the web and picture part of the content. And then because of resources and the needs for the project to live beyond the end of our NSF funding, for example, we transitioned all of the content management aspects of the site over to open source. So this slide lists the type of technologies that are behind the current atlas. All of the web content is managed in a content management system. In our case, we use a content management system called Joomla that's MySQL and PHP based. And basically any content management system works the same way. You store your content in a database, and the system uses scripts to pull it out and put it in a pretty template that displays it to your public. And you can usually extend whatever the core software is with extensions that allow your site to do special things. And so we've extended our site, in our case, with maps that allow you to display data. And we've extended it with our metadata base, our archive, for example. On the maps side of things, maps obviously are implemented in a couple ways in our site. We have our major map interactive tool that is based on map server in the back end, but we also use map server to embed maps and pictures of places inside of reports that are, and those maps and those images are static. So we rely heavily on map server to do all of that. And we like the fact that it can serve both functions depending on what kind of interface you put in front of it or how you call it. Again, this idea of composite reports became something that we did a lot in our atlas. I don't know if there's a better name for this, but basically these are tools or pages that pull information from multiple resources and then interpret them or make queries on them in a way that's useful to a particular audience. And so we've kind of used and reused the idea of this over and over again in our atlas. When I go back to talking about tools, I think we take some of those composite reporting abilities and we've kind of extended some of our more recent tools to put a map in front of the composite reporting function so that you can give the user the ability to draw a polygon on a map and request information about a particular area that gets closer to actually allowing someone to do a GIS analysis on the web. The first version of this tool, these types of tools were developed only for internal use, and they're not publicly available on the Atlas, though they run on the Atlas server. And then because we like the capability that these types of tools provide, we've had a lot of demand for it for some of our sister agencies that are in the Coastal Partnership. We're taking this idea and developing a public-facing tool around them. In our case, it's going to be sort of a dumbed-down version of the California Marine Map tool. So let's see. I wanted to make sure that I hit some of the what difference has it made things that David asked us to do. Going back to search, the biggest thing that's having a search or an online archive has done for us is that we get less requests for data directly to our doorstep. So less phone calls, less emails requesting data. We're at the point now where people only call us when we're missing a data set in our coastal archive. A lot of times people discover that we're missing something in the coastal archive because they saw it in a map someplace. They saw a data set in a map someplace. They went to look for it in the coastal atlas, couldn't find it. For some reason, it hadn't made it into the archive process yet. We don't tend to put things in our archive until they're fully through a metadata process. So that happens sometimes, that we put a data set on a map before we put it in the archive. And I would say that having a search function puts an onus on you to be responsive in that way. If people come to rely on the fact that you have an online archive, it puts this responsibility on you to keep that archive up to date and have the data be there when people are looking about it. In our case, I mentioned at the beginning of my talk that our current catalog is fairly antiquated or based on the original, the database that we could put together at the beginning of our project. We're at the point where we need to grow out of that. I think the training that David has got lined up for us in 2 days is training on GeoNetwork, which is a software that ICANN has experimented with in the implementing of its interoperability prototype. And we're looking to maybe switch out our current search database with a implementation of GeoNetwork that would give us way more capability, give our users way more capabilities to search all parts of metadata, search more spatially than our current spatial search capabilities allow us to, etc. So this slide actually shows some of the connections. We have a current version of, or a recent version of GeoNetwork working behind the scenes right now just as a test to connect ourselves to the ICANN prototype. The advantage of using GeoNetwork is that it has a catalog services for the web service running as part of the software, and that allows other applications outside of our atlas to query our atlas catalog. In this case, we're allowing the ICANN prototype to query it, but in reality, you can install a client tool inside of ArcGIS and query the coastal atlas from your ArcGIS desktop and add data sets that way. You could have an entirely different atlas, potentially, that one that was West Coast wide, query the Oregon Coastal Atlas and pull data sets in that way. So we see a lot of power in implementing CSW kind of more robustly, I guess, in the atlas right now. I guess I've got a couple other things I would mention about where the current tools or current features of the atlas have led us. Just as an example, in our learning section, we have a tool where we showcase a data set about bird colonies on the Oregon coast. Where are they? What kind of birds are they? How big are they? Are they breeding? That kind of thing. It's a data set that came out of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we paired it with, because it's in the learning section, we paired it with photography about the birds and maps about where these places are. And we have a sister agency in the network program that is the Coastal Zone who came to us and said, "Oh, we really love the bird project that you have online. We have an idea that we want to do this exact same thing, but for tide pool critters." So they want to do a tide pooling key that operates similar to the way we've showcased birds on the Oregon coast, but for tide pool critters. And they want to make it a dual use app so that it's viewable in a learning environment, like through the Coastal Atlas, but also viewable in a mobile environment, so that somebody could theoretically be standing over a tide pool, interpreting whatever squishy things are in the tide pool, and basically pulling the information up directly on their phone while they're kneeling there. It sounds like a good way to lose an expensive phone to me, but I love the idea, and I love that they came to us about it, and that they keyed off of like the seed that was planted by one of these modules, which really was only created in the first place to illustrate a particular data set that we had, and if you weren't ahead of time, if you hadn't been a GIS person and be able to like pull those points up on a map and interpret all the keys that are part of the table, that are part of the catalog of birds, you wouldn't necessarily have been able to kind of have that rich interaction experience that a lot of users in the general public want to have. So that'd be an example of kind of where these things go.